Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast, presented by Bee Culture, the magazine of American beekeeping. Beekeeping Today is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flottam, editor of Bee Culture magazine.
I'm really looking forward to today's interview, Kim, with Toni Burnham. She's with the DC Beekeepers, an urban beekeeping group.
Yeah, she's out of Washington, D.C., and if you could find a better place to be under a microscope for almost anything, I think she's picked it. She's been writing for us for a long time, and I'm really interested in what she's going to have to say today.
This will be pretty exciting. You know, you may not realize this, but I started as an urban beekeeper when I lived in Lakewood, Ohio, just west of Cleveland up there, in 6th grade when I had my observation hive in Lakewood. So this is going to be exciting. I'm sure it's changed a little. Just a little,
Jeff, just a little.
Let's call her up. So we have on the line with us now Toni Burnham with the DC Beekeepers. Welcome to Beekeeping Today, Toni.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Toni. It's good to see you again.
It's good to sort of see you too, Kim.
The wonders of technology. So, Toni, we welcome you to the show. I'm really looking forward to learning more about beekeeping in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area, the challenges that you've faced as a beekeeper, and also as an organizer of the BC Beekeepers group. And maybe that's something that we can all learn from. So, again, welcome to the show. So tell us a little bit about DC Beekeepers.
Well, the DC Beekeepers have been an above-the-ground organization only since 2012.
So above the ground refers that there was.
Well, you know, the DC beekeeping movement was explicitly more widely legalized in 2012.
Okay.
DC Act of 2012. We didn't even have regs for a while after that, but there had always been beekeepers in Washington. I would say that the fact that we were made more widely legal at that time is an expression of larger movements in urban beekeeping in the country, though.
Yeah. Well, that's that's really good. And that's within the last, you said, since 2007, you said?
No, the Sustainable DC Act was 2012.
2012.
I became a beekeeper on April 9th, 2005.
You got it down to the day?
Oh, I call it my bee day.
How so?
And I do celebrate my bee day. Come on. Happy bee day to you.
No, I know. But did you capture a swarm? Did you buy a package? Did you?
No, Lloyd Snyder put 2 packages of Italian bees in my hands in a park outside Baltimore, Maryland. And for some reason, people with trailers full of millions of bees handing out boxes to folks with out-of-state plates doesn't look shifty to the cops. So that's how I started with a couple of Georgia packages.
So you just happened to be driving down the street and you saw a guy with a trailer saying bees, $35 a box, or what did you?
Driving down the street had something to do with it. I bet it has a lot to do with it for a lot of people. In 2004, I was driving down the street. I was working for .com at the time, and I heard a BBC radio program about beekeeping in London, and became extremely intrigued. I had been a gardener, animal lover, birder, would-be ecologist, wildflower person for a long time, and one of the messages they put out there was very pro-urban, that there was this chance, this little niche in the environment where you could actually make a substantially valuable contribution to an important species, something critical to agriculture in the world, and maybe do it better in the city than you could in the country or in a rural setting, based on at least that early period of time. And, you know, I'm used to getting picked on for living in DC. So it may not have been 100% my happy place that responded to that. But by the next spring, I was in a beekeeping class with the Montgomery County, Maryland Beekeepers.
Well, fantastic. So, okay, I took us off track. So DC Beekeepers was formed, became legal and incorporated. So how many members are there currently? Or how many did you start out with, and where are you now?
Well, you know, we ran as a virtual organization probably until the past 3 years, when we finally incorporated and did things like have membership fees. We have about 200 paid members. And our social media, which is the sort of virtual part of the operation that was always there, and that has carried us through in many of the functions that other situations would use a club for. We reach 600 or 700 people
Wow.
via we have paired Facebook and Google groups. I am not Twitter friendly. I don't do Instagram or Snapchat as a native person. So I've hived those functions off to folks about 15, 20 years younger than me in the club. So those numbers are not included
Okay.
in what I give you. But yeah, it routinely we have 500 people that we reach and we know are paying attention, and we probably touch a couple thousand school kids and
Wow.
others in outreach events during the year.
Well, that's really good.
That bigger number, Tony. Most of them are in DC, surrounding areas, urban DC, or are you all over the map?
Well, in order to control the madness, I pretty much keep it to DC. Though when we do educational activities, our club funds educational stuff that might happen in the city. We do a lot of classroom work. We do a lot of work with DC summer camps with the Parks and Rec Department. That example, and we worked with Dr. Wyatt Mangum to offer a top bar hive beekeeping course with the National Geographic this spring, and certainly any beekeeper in the area was welcome to take that class. But I just can't be doing the harvest fairs outside of city boundaries and be able to keep my volunteers harnessed and around the needs downtown.
When you say, excuse me, when you say harvesters, you mean when
I meant Harvest Fest.
Oh, Harvest Fest. Okay.
That's a very typical thing. When September in the Mid-Atlantic, September and October are owned by the Weekend Harvest Festival. The beekeepers can disappear into those festivals and never be seen again. Teasing. But yeah, we have to focus our resources at all, wherever possible, on stuff that happens in town. We do our level best to network back and forth. For instance, somebody in Northern Virginia might get an overture from a church group that's in DC, and we'll recruit for that. We'll find someone for that. While a similar request for a group in, say, suburban Maryland, we might send off to one of our compatriots out that way. And we try to mentor similarly.
Good. So you have about 200. You said 200 members active.
Those are paid.
To the paid. So what's approximate demographics? Age, gender, profession? Are they primarily professionals, I would suppose, in the DC area?
Well, one of the things I do notice is they're younger than me. I feel funny about generalizing widely. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that all beekeeping is local, but I did decide to get some general facts and figures in order to see if I had a clue about what was going on. Generally speaking, if you live in an urban area, you're likely to be 8 years younger on average than a person who lives in a rural area.
As a beekeeper?
As a person.
In
the last census, the average American in a rural and in an area defined as rural was 51 years old. The median age of an American in an urban area was 43 years old. In DC, the median age of a citizen is 34 years old. Mm. So we are young on the city side of things. So what that means is, in DC, I'm already talking to you about a younger cohort of people with a younger set of, I would say overall that it's pretty safe to term almost everybody who is active in our club and almost everybody who attends our educational course and other events and meetings is almost certainly a middle or upper middle class college educated person, mm-hmm. almost certainly under 50 years old. There's a huge bump right at that median that we told you about, right around 33, 34 years old. DC is also a very transient city. One of the things we giggle about is we believe that we've trained more beekeepers currently resident in Seattle, Washington than in Washington, D.C.
That's really interesting. And just real quick, and then just the membership. So you see a growth in membership from the beginning, or you see a plateauing, or is it still?
Yeah. I've been expecting the plateau and the drop off, frankly, because we've been cool long enough that the sort of organic beating should have taken over by now. But
Hmm.
and I'd heard word from other urban areas that things like interest in the educational offerings was less. So I've been waiting for that plateau to happen here in DC. We run our beginners course January through March. Um, and we allow people to be on a waiting list to hear about the announcement of registration. We admit people in the form of households, 40 to 50 households any given year. We have 500 names running on our waiting list, waiting to be notified for seats in that class.
Wow.
In 2016, we sold out in 10 hours.
Wow.
10 hours every seat in the class. And we decided that we had such a scarce resource. I'm not comfortable training more people than that to
Hmm.
enter my urban beekeeping situation because they need to be mentored. Just letting
Right.
500, no way, no way. But I felt like the way we were doing it was just favoring people who hovered around over their email or who were online all the time. There's not a one-to-one relationship between that and the folks who are most interested in beekeeping, most likely to be committed to an outdoor urban ag activity. So we changed it up last year and we gave priority to paid members. That's one of the reasons why we got into paid membership. And so it took us 3 days to sell out.
Very good. Good.
So,
Yeah.
Tony, I
So-
gotta break
go
in
ahead.
here with a quick question on if you're adding 200 people a year, you're losing some, of course. You said you have a transient population there, but at what point do you think you are going to saturate the available forage in Washington, D.C.?
You are asking one of the questions that keeps me up at night. Believe it or not, and I am that sort of person. I do get worried. I think we've managed to do a fair amount of scaring the heck out of our students. I would say of the 40 to 50 households that graduate, roughly half of them attempt to keep bees in the next 2 years. I think you have noted, and I've noted from other sources, that roughly a third of those are still keeping bees 3 years later. So that gives you some number of how many we are adding year on year.
Well, that number I'm finding out the last maybe 5 years that 3 year horizon is becoming more and more common.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I can go back 20 years before Varroa mites with our magazine, and 20 years ago, a subscriber lasted 8 years, and now they're lasting 5 on average.
Yeah.
And it's looking like it's heading towards 4. We're looking at this year, so the pattern is there. So I'm not surprised that you're seeing it, even with the background and the mentoring that you're giving your people.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a pattern.
Well, they turn out to be bugs. You're looking at larvae and goopy stuff, and it's sweaty at large portions of the year. I mean, I think it's totally legit to try something and decide it's not for you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that even the 2/3 who are gone after 3 years are out there advocating for bees and maybe making the sort of environmental choices that we need to see made, both for pollinators and for our communities. I often ask myself, how many new beekeepers does Washington, D.C. really need? At what point do you need another one? Well, you can always use another friend, I tell you. So the turnover doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I wonder, anybody in an urban setting, what you just said makes a lot of sense, is that once a beekeeper, always a beekeeper friend, probably.
Yep.
And would this be a support group that you could draw on if you needed to fix something, if you needed to change something, add something on the government level? I've got 200 beekeepers, but I got 1,000 friends out there that maybe I could harness. I think that's something that all beekeeping groups should keep in mind, is although you're not a member of my group anymore, you're still beekeeper friendly. And when I need something, can I reach out and ask for some help? I think that's a good idea.
Well, I like the idea of you bringing that to the forefront. I would say that that's what's in our nature. In DC, if you were to compare us to other urban beekeeping associations. We probably look like the suck-up lackey running dogs of the club world. We have always sought relationships with appropriate government officials, meaning like the folks who run parks and our urban foresters. I had the chance to hook up out of the gate with a five-star hotel. Let me tell you, the legal budget of a five-star hotel is a lot bigger than mine. The they just I always thought that the friends were critical because I think that bees are not they're not important because they're by themselves in an ecosystem. They're important because the way they weave together ecosystems. And I felt that beekeeping had to be the same way. We had to be in the DNA of the political classes, of the elementary schools, of the highfalutin travelers, like, we work with foresters, we work with the police, we work with anyone who will work with us.
Toni, I think one of the things that you just brought up shows itself really well, and I'm somewhat familiar with your program on dealing with swarms, but what you've done is more organized than I've ever seen anybody do it. Not to say that somebody hasn't done it this way, but can you give me a rundown on how that works? Because it's really pretty amazing.
I don't think I'm at all alone in it. I think it's one of those things that I was just noisy about early, by the way. In DC, what we've done is in our community taken a look inward and asked people, do you want to retrieve swarms? You know, to some people that looks like a scary, interesting adventure. To many of us, it looks like $100 worth of bees. So first we got into our own community, found out who wanted to go after swarms, made sure there was some general training, some general information about how to catch them. And then we put together a sign up where beekeepers in Washington and anyone outside Washington who will come to Washington can sign up to receive announcements when a swarm lands in a specific area. We've divided Washington up by zip code. We have 72 unique responders covering 37 zip codes. I have this enormous spreadsheet that shows 15 and 30 people in different zip codes who were waiting for text messages to come over their cell phone in order to be told that a swarm has landed and how to go after it. I have a whole list of protocols that we've had to organize over the years to keep fisticuffs from happening with 6 beekeepers arriving at the same swarm. That's one I learned from New York, by the way. Don't let that happen.
Oh my!
But and then that's the part where we get organized. We have the beekeepers. They know what to expect. They know where they're expected to do it. And then we reach out to the general public, media, neighborhood list servers, Instagram, stuff I don't do, very locally targeted media to say, look, don't be scared. You can be the coolest kid in town. Call the beekeepers and we will send someone. And we're at a point where I think our network is so tight that I will often get 4 individual contacts on a given swarm. And I usually know about it before the city does on city property.
Hmm.
So I think good thing going.
Yeah, it's amazing though, especially if you have fisticuffs of people trying to fight over a swarm. I hadn't experienced that here. So
well, I mean,
I
we're
know.
on the East Coast. You're like on the West Coast. Y'all are relaxed out.
Yeah, that's right. They've legalized things here. People are very mellow. So how many swarm calls do you get? Do you see with the urban beekeepers? And a proliferation of urban beekeepers? Do you see an increase of swarms over the last few years, or do you see a decrease of swarms over the last few? I mean, or is it the same?
Yeah, a really limited data set.
Yeah.
But we've had years where it felt like crickets, where it was less than a dozen swarm calls, and we've had years where it has been more than 50. There was one afternoon when I was trying to run a harvesting event at a food bank, and I got 5 swarm calls in 3 hours, which was very disruptive. But the nearest, I would say the answer is absolutely yes. The more beekeepers, the more swarms.
Yeah.
But there's a direct relationship between the loss reports that you see and the number of the size of the swarming response. Washington last year had far more swarms than Washington this year. And I noticed that the winter loss information is considerably higher.
Mm.
which is it's a sad business.
Yeah.
I believe part of the improvement in the number of swarms is also that I do think that we've had more feral bee colonies become established as we've had more beekeepers come into Washington D.C. And so one of the stats that bothers me, I'm glad to know it, but that bothers me out of David Tarpey's lab is it appears that feral colonies in urban areas are doing better on average than managed colonies
Ooh.
in urban areas, which if that's not a wake up and smell the coffee moment, I don't know where there is.
I think your observation on swarm numbers this year kind of mirrors a lot of the country. Where I'm at, the swarm calls have been fewer than in the past, and it's just been kind of a pattern.
Same here.
Winter losses, spring weather. Not sure of the reasons why. Better beekeeping. All three of them probably maybe could be some of the reasons, but
I do know that there's one other thing that you just reminded me of. After a few years of doing this, to a certain extent, our switchboard isn't necessary in some neighborhoods. There's this "I know a guy" thing going on. I find out that people who caught swarms for some block last year, they saved his phone number. This is an exact example I'm thinking of, and they called him again. They didn't call me. So there may be this whole other network that's developed. Like maybe we're still the utility department, but if you've got your own personal electrician, right? Why would you call?
So how do people know to call you rather than the police or the fire department or the hospital or whoever they?
Well, first of all, I've told the police and the fire department and the hospital and the Department of Health and Animal Control to call me. So that those all work for me. Those are all just fine.
So you're often the second call.
Yep.
The homeowner is going to call the police. Oh my God, there's bees out here. They're going to say, call this number. She'll help you.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I write a letter every couple years or so to all of the police substations saying, just remember.
And that is good advice for every beekeeping club in the country. Write a letter every year.
How many times do the police hear, "Hey, can I give you a hand?" You know, if there's one thing that beekeepers need to be, it's an answer to problems, not a source of problems. Nature means that we're going to be a problem sometime. Everybody is. But if you're there most of the time with the dustpan and brush, they're going to want you to be around and above ground. There are things in most cities in terms of reaching out to the public. We've had decent luck with the Cool Free neighborhood. The Cool Free citywide "What's Going On This Weekend" paper, printing an announcement for us. The local news radio AM now FM station is always happy to sort of chuckle and put out our announcement. I really do believe that getting that stuff pumped out into neighborhood news groups, Reddit groups, list servers for those who are even older than I am, I guess, that's something that people have saved on their phone and say, "Oh, wait, I know about this swarm thing. I'm supposed to," yeah. And then they find us and call us.
Do you have an emergency team? And I'm thinking of the truck going by DC that takes an off ramp a little too steep and goes over. And do you have a group of people who know where to get a forklift in the middle of the night?
Believe it or not, former English major that I was, I can probably get a forklift in the middle of the night. But I actually was just thinking of which guy that might be. In DC, we don't actually have major transshipping of beehives and colonies like you're talking about. There was an incident outside the city just a few weeks ago that showed how ill prepared we truly are. It was someone moving packages up 95 and apparently had a seizure, and truck went off the road. A whole bunch of packages fell off the truck. But it turned out there were 6 beekeepers in traffic when the traffic stopped. And they all sort of piled up, put the packages back on but all of us went berserk. It went out via like, "Oh my God, there's a truck with bees on the road of 495. And we're like, "Respond now." And we all throw on our suits and clog traffic. And it turned out to be totally handled. We did not have, there are protocols for this stuff that we need to learn. But one of the, we just don't, the way DC is situated, there ain't nobody bringing a semi full of bees through the city. That could be, my goodness, most cities, that's got to be different.
Well, I know there are cities that are routinely passed by semis going west or east or wherever, and they would be wise to at least kind of put it in their thinking caps and say, we need to have something when the police call and there's 450 colonies all over an exit.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead. Sorry.
Urban beekeeping. What's the worst thing that happens in an urban beekeeping situation? Not my bees died, but things caused by other things, people probably.
Well, we knocking on every piece of wood in my vicinity, I would say that we have not experienced anything that I would say rose to the level of a horror show. I can talk about events like Superstorm Sandy and some of the most violent windstorms that we've had here, especially over this past winter. I worry about, telescoping hive covers gone airborne. I worry about hives plummeting to the ground from the signature location of urban beekeeping, which is the rooftop. The rooftop is a really good place for bees. Under those particular circumstances, that's one of the reasons why I'm glad that I'm the lackey running dog of the regulators, that they know that we're here, that they know that we're organized. If stuff like that happens, we've got a chance for the first responders to call us and get our help in early. We talk a lot before events that we can foresee, like windstorms, about lashing and securing beehives. When we talk about apiary setup in the very beginning, we talk about minimizing the risk to others in the immediate vicinity. That particular situation that you mentioned is the one that dogs me. I've heard of flooding associated with Superstorm Sandy taking out apiaries on the ground level in New York City. We don't have that there. I do believe it behooves all of us, as unpleasant as it is, to think of the worst possible thing that could happen in your city that with which your bees could be involved. I believe wind blowing a beehive off a roof and causing it to explode in shards and stinging insects is pretty bad, and it's one we're going to work to avoid.
Has that happened?
No, we've had bees. We've had a hive come off a roof, but it wasn't like that. It mostly got slid, and then went off, and it wasn't on a sidewalk.
So just real.
And it wasn't very big either.
But it was exciting nonetheless, I'm sure.
Well, it's not what we like, is it?
No. So back to the specifics. So looking at the bees, is there a race of bee that does better in an urban setting than you'd think, or is it across the board? People are getting Italians versus Caucasians versus.
The best thing about the Mid-Atlantic area in terms of our sourcing of bees is we're doing a lot of local genetics. I really think the best bee is going to be the one that has the characteristics that the beekeeper likes to manage, like highly productive or really gentle or reduced swarm risk, but that winters well, multiple generations of wintering well in place. We really are getting there. We tip of the hat to the Northern Virginia beekeepers that started several years ago, teaching their members how to make and overwinter nukes, sufficient nukes for the beginners in the class the next year to have access, each household, to at least one local overwintered nukes. Those local genes are really wonderful, both in terms of survivability and in knowability. And in other words, the knowledge of what the mother queens and the grandmother queens and all those bees, how they behaved and what they were like. We have a lot of bees in schoolyards in Washington, D.C., so knowing what you've got there is incredibly important. Myself, I'm a real fan of carnies. In D.C., we have a short, sharp nectar flow that was over 2-3 weeks ago, and we still have to make all the decisions that come with getting bees to October 1 ready to winter.
Yeah.
So I like those carnies because they're totally clued in to environmental factors, to the climate, to temperature, to colony size. They do have a higher swarm risk. Now, why do you suppose that I organized the swarm squad now? So I really do like them, but I think that mix them in with the local genes. We've been buying some queens out of West Virginia, these ankle biters, and sort of adding them to the mix, and I think I'm in love.
Ankle biters?
They're Mite Mahler.
Ankle biters?
I think it's an offshoot of the Russian Queen Breeders program. You can probably find a video on YouTube. They like open a hive and you're looking at the top bars, and they put a small hive beetle down on the top bars, and and the bees just literally jump on. It's like the world's toughest bouncers jump on this hive beetle, and the mode of operation I understand is they chew the feet off of mites. That's why they're called ankle biters or mite maulers. And
Hadn't heard that.
It's effective.
Had you heard that, Kim? I'm sure you
Yeah.
have.
I think they were developed, I want to say Purdue, and they've since spread out because there is some success in that mode of being resistant. So, yeah, they're fun to watch, like you said.
I think I'm in love. I got to tell you. Oh.
Well, one of the other things, quickly, since you've been lucky and haven't had major problems, what has come? I know that your work in schools has. I just am in awe of what you guys have done in schools. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how to get it started if people aren't doing it at the moment?
So if you're an urban beekeeper and you look around your club meetings, you are almost certainly going to see somebody who looks a lot like you or comes from a very similar background to you. If you want to take urban beekeeping and make it the possession, the heritage, the culture of the entire community, what you need to do is suborn the children. You need to get into those homes that way. So we very early attempted to find a certain few. We're not incredibly numerous, but teachers who were interested in folding bees and pollination into the core science curriculum. In Washington, D.C. right now, that's a grade 2 checkbox that the teachers are supposed to hit. So we collected activities and resources and lessons and PowerPoints. And we work with teachers who will work with us. I don't think any beekeeper should go into a classroom that the teacher isn't already in and helping you run, where you haven't got a plan for what you want and who you've got there and managing the situation. I say that because a lot of folks who don't go into a classroom are rightfully terrified. Classrooms are incredibly hard to manage, and when they are managed, it is a work of genius, and you need that genius in there with you. So I would reach out to friendly educators. I would be happy to share every last little bit of anything that we have developed, from in-class activities, PowerPoint presentations, lessons learned. I've got stuff, and I'm happy to share it. We also have numerous teachers among our beekeepers who are always happy to talk about how things work. The thing is, one of the things I've noticed, and this is for any presentation with kids, even if you don't want to take on anything as sizable as a school, I go in there in my bee earrings, in my bee t-shirt. I even have bee sneakers. They're terrible for working bees, but they got bees on them, so I wear the bee sneakers. If you come in looking like just the eccentric, interesting person that you are, those kids are going to meet you. If you bring it, they meet you, and everybody has fun. I really believe that.
That's a great message. That's great. And working with the young, the kids and school age kids, really promote a future bee friends. You know, not necessarily beekeepers, but bee friendly, and that's a great program. And just we're coming up towards the end of our time, but maybe you could just and Kim might have some other follow up, but I just wanted to know what you see as the future for urban beekeeping. Do you see it expanding and becoming more?
Well, I am so grateful. I am grateful for that question, because I think that we're on the hub of a different time. It was the undiscovered country when I arrived in 2005. It was relatively unexploited. It was sparse. We had all sorts of benefits that you can't get away with anymore, from there not being very many bees there and there being lots of resources and interesting things to learn. Being big is different than being small. And we're seeing dynamics in our management. I always thought our management had to be good because of the sheer number of people who are impacted by bad management decisions we might make. But now the number of bees that are impacted by bad management decisions we might make is very, very high. There is no beehive in Washington, D.C. that does not overlap with at least 24 other beehives in terms of its forage area. There is immense pathogen pressure. So there's the part where, are you being kind to your beekeeping neighbor as well as your human neighbor? Or do you have more just renegade rogue beekeeping neighbors who just aren't going to do their stuff? And how do you bulletproof your hive in that setting? And when do you not? There's a point where when do you stop bringing bees into a situation which is no win?
It's like,
And go
I
ahead.
was going to say, just dealing with bee havers versus beekeepers,
That's right. It just seems more intense
Yeah.
in the city.
You'd think so. All right. Well, Kim, anything else to wrap up here with Toni?
Well, Toni, this has been fun. Way too short.
Yep.
I'll tell people who listen that you can tune in to Toni every month in Bee Culture Magazine. She's got her column in there. They are always gold. And we love having her there every month. So if you want more of Toni, certainly tune in. Bee Culture every month. And actually, we've been using some of her work in Beekeeping, also our other magazine. So you can catch her in two places if you want. And I think we're fortunate in that manner. Jeff, what else we got to do here?
Well, I think that's about it, Kim. I just want to remind folks we've been talking today with Toni Burnham from DC Beekeepers, and it's a great group of urban beekeepers. She's got a wealth of information. She's more than willing to share, and we really appreciate you sharing this afternoon today with Beekeeping Today podcast. Thank you, Toni, very much.
Thank you.
One question. I'm going to interrupt you both here. Toni, you said that you had information that you'd be happy to share with people. How do they do that?
Email works. dcbees@dcbeekeepers.org.
I'll make sure that your email is in the show notes. So
thank you very much.
You bet.
Toni, thank you very much for your time today. I know you're busy, and I'm guessing that you've got to go take care of bees.
Yeah. Take care of the beekeeper. It's 104 out there.
Oh.
Yeah, I got to go and bundle up. It's kind of cold here in Olympia. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Toni, and appreciated your time today and had a great time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Toni. Well, there you have it, Jeff. I'm really glad you got a chance to meet my friend Toni. Her and her group have done a lot in DC and a lot in urban beekeeping.
Well, that's for sure. I sitting there listening to what Toni had to say, and I was thinking so much of that applies to not only urban beekeeping, but all beekeeping communities or all beekeeping clubs. I was thinking about our own local community or club, and then I was thinking that's a lot of great advice in terms of the connections and the people she's working with to get the out there and about with the fire departments and health departments and anybody else who could be called. So it was really fun listening to her. Thanks a lot for inviting her to the podcast. So what do you think about all this, Kim?
Well, Jeff, bees in the city. It's not a new concept, certainly. Toni has a collection of magazines, in fact, about women keeping bees on rooftops in New York more than 50 years ago, and they didn't come from a beekeeping magazine. But as you know, the world turns and things are different from what was going on 50 or 60 years ago, and I think that DC Bees has managed to find what works now so that bees in the city can continue. You know, personally, I think the work her group is doing with school kids is having the most influence. Show kids how cool bees are, and the kids will show their parents, and suddenly you have two generations of people thinking having bees in the city isn't such a bad idea. But anybody who's keeping bees in any size city would do well to work with the local government like they do to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Plus, having an incredible swarm call program so police and fire and emergency people have a place to send people right now is a no-brainer. And the DC folks always have people right there, right now, who want to help. Sorted out by zip code, no less. We talked about density of bees in DC. How many colonies can that city support, one wonders? For that matter, how many colonies can the area around your hive support? Density isn't just a problem in urban settings, it's becoming an acute problem almost everywhere. This year, North and South Dakota, for instance, are losing foraging land at an alarming rate due to the changing status of the Conservation Reserve Program. Less land, less clover, fewer bees, less honey. It's a downward spiral I don't like to see. And lost forage isn't only due to the loss of CRP land. And even though cropland use is flat this year, corn and soybean growth is about the same as it was last year, there ain't no forage in a corn or cotton field. And of course, increasing urban expansion is an ongoing threat. More parking lots, roads, developments, sterile lawns, the list goes on. If this continues, more farmland unsuitable for forage, forcing more of us into urban and semi-urban settings, and those with only a finite amount of forage, it could be, well, pretty soon we'll all be urban beekeepers, having to deal with good neighbor beekeeping, zoning, water, and all the rest. And that's Beekeeping Today.
Wow. Good words to consider, Kim. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being here. We'll catch you next time, Kim.
Okay, Jeff, take care.
Bye.